All right, so we'll just start a new record. We're recording now? Yes. Is there any way I can tell if it's recording just by looking?
On our end, on the top left-hand corner, there's a red dot that says recording.
Oh, that's what this dot's for. Okay, I got you. Cool.
Yeah, my phone is on the top right. It's like recording with the red button. So yeah.
All right, cool. The more you know. So let's do a ribbon spine. Oh man. Let's do a ribbon spine on a snake, I guess. Let's do a ribbon spine on a snake.
Can I ask you a question about weight painting real quick?
I'm about to go into a demo. Can you make it quick?
Yeah. It's just a yes or no. Is it better to just immediately, like when you're weight painting on joints, to just immediately like get flood all the negatives, so it's like no influence on whatever joint you're on, and just paint it manually like that, instead of trying to work with what Maya already gives you? Because sometimes I always try to like just work with what Maya gives me, and like try to like erase influence and then paint it where it needs to be. But there's always like little bits and pieces of influences.
If what Maya's given you is garbage, then yeah, just go ahead and just erase what's there. But you probably about 75% of the time, I'm going to work with what's already there. So
all right.
it's not really a yes or no. It's just kind of it just depends on what you need.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Let's do. I'm going to rig a tube. We'll just call it a snake. All right. First and foremost, we always need to go in, use our transformations, delete our history. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a plane, NURBS plane. Let's go ahead and move it. If you guys have questions, put them in the chat for me. Does anyone want to be my chat moderator?
I can do it again. That's fine.
Sweet. All right, so I'm going to go and take that plane, and I need to go under. Let's do modeling, surfaces, rebuild. And I need to give myself spans. I'm going to do a U span of, let's do 10. So I'm going to have 10 follicles in there, and V span of 1. So I have 10 spans here, you'll see. I'm going to go and take that plane, and let's rename it ribbon spine plane. Let's rename this mesh, since we should always be renaming our stuff. Then we're going to go into, let's see, our FX, in hair, create hair. And so we're going to have a U count to match the spans. Technically, you don't have to have it matching the spans, but it just makes things a lot simpler for us to remember. So again, 10 to 10, so we're going to do that. 10, V is 1. I don't need paint effects. I don't need, I just need the NURBS curves. Actually, I don't even need those. I'm just going to delete them anyways, but I just need the follicles, really. Go ahead and delete the output curves. Delete your hair system. And then, let's see, open up the follicles group, and then delete the curve histories under each one of the follicles. Don't delete the follicles. Just like that.
Professor, can you explain the difference between the U and the V coordinates?
Basically just means it's like X and Y. It's just left and right, up or down. It relates more to the UV coordinates when you get into texturing, because there we can do UV mapping, and so it's relating to that. Ribbon spine. All right, so I need 10 joints. Let's get rid of that nucleus. Okay. So let's go under rigging, skeleton, create joints. So we got one right there. Let's go and name this follicle joint 1. And I'm going to go and hit Control D. So we all got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I have 10 joints. So we're going to take each one of these, drop them under their respective, or just there's no respective. It's just we're just dropping them under a follicle. So it doesn't really matter.
So is there like a proper top and bottom or like base and tip of a ribbon spine, or are the ends identical?
What do you mean?
So right now how you're putting the joints underneath the follicles.
Yeah.
I feel like I remember at some point you had mentioned like double check and make sure that the joints are actually going like in order down the length of the ribbon spine, or does that matter?
Not really. I mean, if
Okay.
you can change the names of the joint if you need to. I just like to name them so that they're relatively in order. So in theory, like, you know, if you have a root, you could do, you know, roots down here if this is a spine. You could do ribbon spine, follicle joint 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But like these follicles are not always going to show up like in order. Sometimes I've had like the second one is like 7th down the list.
Right.
So they don't always show up in order, but usually they will. So I just kind of throw them in there, and if it works, it works. You know, if it doesn't, it doesn't. It seems like it's working, so
Okay.
I'm cool with this. All right, so I need to go make some control joints. So I'm going to do the 2 tips, which are going to be the follicle joint 1, follicle joint 10, and then I'm going to choose a middle joint. So since we have 10 joints, I don't really have a specific middle spot because halfway between is going to be somewhere like right about here. So I just, you know, I just choose one of these. You know, you can choose more if you want to, whatever. I'm going to go and duplicate them, unparent them. And we're going to label this control joint base. Control joint, which one is this one? Tip. And then control joint mid. And since the mid one isn't like completely in the middle, like it's a little lower, it's not going to kill you if you just kind of like just raise it up just a little bit. So it's kind of in between these 2 joints. because you got to remember, we're not skinning it. We're not skinning the control joints to the to other joints. We're skinning it to the ribbon, and so it doesn't necessarily mean or matter that it's, you know, on top of another joint. It helps, like in specific instances, like here, like on the tip, where we have where we may want to have that tip joint, that tip control joint, controlling maybe the endpoint follicle like 100%. But like in the midpoint, it's not that big of a deal. I'm going to grow these so it's a little bit easier to see them. And then these also need to be in a hierarchical chain. So I'm going to take the mid, put it under the base, put the tip under the mid. So you'll see now we have bones in each of these. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go and grab each of these joints. I'm going to grab my ribbon, and we are going to skin, bind skin, selected joints. There we go. Test that. Test that. Test that. Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm going to be skinning the mesh to the follicle joints, not the control joints. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my mesh, follicle joints. Skin, bind skin. There we go. There we go. So it's working. All right. So we might want a little bit of a smoother transition with, let's do X-ray joints, with some of the, or a little bit of smoother transition with the bending on the ribbon. So what we'll need to do is work on the weight painting for the ribbon itself. Okay. So let's go ahead and do a skin weight paint. And then you'll see here, like the bottom has a lot of influence. The top has a tiny amount, and the mid has most of the influence going up to the top. So what I'm gonna do is actually go in and do a replacement. And I would rather, honestly, this to have a lot more influence. The tip joint have a lot more influence here. And then the mid should have more influence in the middle portion of this. And then the base is just gonna be down here. It's got some stuff up here, so we'll take this out. And then I'm just gonna go through and flood the heck out of this. Don't need that. But I can smooth this out now. And so now if we look at the shape, when it bends, you'll see it's gonna be a bit more fluid in terms of the shape that it makes. So it kind of looks a little more like a bow maybe than a static joint chain that's rotating. So something kind of like that. And if we look at the mesh, you'll see how it's kind of moving a little bit more. All right, so controllers. Let's put some controllers in here. con 1, con 2, con 3. And I'm going to go and take con 3, move it up to there we go, right there. Con 2, right there. And then con 1, right there. All right, so each one of these, let's go ahead and freeze transformations on them. Do we have any questions, Tiffany?
We got one, but I think I got it. I actually personally do have one though.
Okay, what's your
So
question?
in the Footloose model, we had a ribbon spine going through the neck and then it connected to the central like head null joint. How would you make that connection going from ribbon spine to rest of model?
Okay. So let's say this is our ribbon spine and then we have the head. So what you would have is basically the joint up here. Goodness. That's great. I'll fix it later. So a joint that goes up here, maybe this is like your head base joint. Maybe like this is like your neck right here. And then we could do like a head tip joint. And then like, you know, everything else would be up here for the rest of the head. So you could go off the control joint to join this in if you wanted to, or it could go off the follicle joint. Technically either one, but there are some caveats on which one you'd want to go with. So if I did, let's just duplicate this, and I'm going to put joint 3, this one right here. That one's going to go under the constrained, the control joint right there, and then joint 1, that one's going to go under the follicle. Okay, so there's 2 different ways of doing this. Now, when I rotate, let's see, I'm gonna actually join this. Let me do the orient constraints real quick. Okay, so if I do this with the control joint, you'll see that as I rotate this controller, the head that's constrained to the top control joint, this one stays with my controller, okay? 100% it stays with it. The other one that is constrained to the follicle joint is staying with the follicle joint, and it's not gonna break away from it. Maybe the mesh doesn't break away or doesn't kind of act weird, but depending on what you're wanting, you probably want the head to stick with the controller at 100%. So if you do it with the follicle joint, that's going to present an issue where you're going to have to go in and probably go ahead and weight paint the tip a little bit more. So you'll see it brings it down closer to where the controller actually is. So they're actually moving, you know, not at 100%, but probably like at 90% movement. So it's pretty close. I personally, again, it depends on the rig, but probably just to keep things a little bit more controllable, I probably would do it to the control joint. So you would just build off the rest of your rig from that control joint that is sitting right here. Again, kind of treating that like a regular FK spine.
Okay, that answered it perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. And that would go the same for arms. You could build them technically off follicles, but you also could do that off of the control joint. And then same thing for, like, if this is your root, you could then do your groin joint and then do the hips and everything else. Okay. And that's it. That's a ribbon spine right there in pretty simple terms in about, what, 20 minutes? Any questions? Okay. Good job, guys, in the chat. Really nice. All right.